Another example. In 2004, SARS broke out, sudden acute respiratory syndrome. It was a fast-spreading disease, and the race was on to sequence SARS, to find a cure, and to get, first, before finding the cure, to get a genetic sequence. So, shortly after the worst of the outbreaks in China, a little outfit called the Genome Sciences Center in Western Canada announced that they had produced the sequence, the genetic sequence for SARS. They announced that they published it. They'd done the whole thing in less than a month. And it was an incredible bit of biological detective work. And that was great. But the funny thing is, or the puzzle there is, why wasn't it China? China, right, had the disease first. They had more cases. They had more samples. They had a much bigger incentive than any other country in the world to get it right. No slouches in the thinking department. They have excellent biochemists, excellent computer scientists, excellent research facilities, and they didn't sequence the SARS virus. It was the folks in Canada. So there was a remarkable article in May of that year by Henry Yang in China, saying, I was there. I was in a biological research lab in Beijing. And what we lacked wasn't incentive, and it wasn't expertise. What we lacked was sharing. The only way to take on a job this complicated is for people to share their resources, and the Chinese government wouldn't let us share. Every time we turned around, we had to ask for permission to share one sample or another. Meanwhile, there was a write-up of the Canadian work in the Linux Journal. And what you see reading that is that the Genome Sciences Center, their advantage was that they were too small to believe they could do the whole thing by themselves. So that every place in the system where they could involve someone else, they did. They ran on open source software, they ran on Linux, they used open source biological tools, they checked data in and out of publicly accessible databases, because they recognized that taking advantage of the other work that had already been done was going to be the way to fix this problem as quickly as possible. And as the information, as the possibility of this kind of collaboration on a global scale increases, the competition we're seeing isn't so much between rich and poor or large and small. Not even so much between fast and slow as it is between open and closed, or able to share and not able to share. The ability to involve other people quickly and at low cost was the thing that ended up seeing the SARS virus sequence. Not incentive, not brain power, not resources. The ability to leverage brain power and resources from other places. That's an example of the cultural shift that I think is in front of us. As I said earlier in the talk, the large, unmanaged group of citizens, of the people formerly known as the audience, of us, we can't act like a business. We can't act like a government. We're too diverse in our needs and interests and behaviors. So how do we coordinate with one another, right, in ways that produce benefit or value without having to take on the overhead of management? And the answer is cultural change. Now, some of the cultural change is already happening, and it's happening just as a side effect of our adopting these tools. But the most important cultural changes, the kind of cultural changes that led the Genome Sciences Center to be the first to sequence the SARS virus, have to do with actually making a conscious decision to change the way they work, and possibly to make a decision to try and change the way other people work or live as well. Here's an example of that. It's one of the things that's going on in the States right now that I'm most interested in because it's such a dramatic move. There's a site called Patients Like Me, and the idea behind Patients Like Me is that it is difficult to cure rare diseases, in part because it's difficult simply to get enough people together to run a legitimate test of drugs or therapies. So the idea behind Patients Like Me is we will just gather together everybody suffering from a particular disease, and it will make it easier for researchers to find the test patients they need, to test therapies, to learn things. So at this point, there's a ALS, sometimes called Lou Gehrig's disease in the United States. It's a disease of atrophying of the muscles. Patients Like Me now gets one new member with ALS for every 10 diagnoses. They've assembled the largest collection of ALS sufferers ever in the history of the world. And down at the level of individual detail, right, here is a user, slow motion movie, a male, 47 years old, lives in Atlanta. Right? Suffering from bipolar illness, manic depressive, right? Putting up really specific information about what is causing him distress, about how bad the distress is, how well or badly he can function. And although he hasn't exactly given his street address here, right? Given the amount of other information, if I had to go around looking for 47-year-old males in Atlanta, Georgia, I could probably find this person with a little work. This flies in the face of US culture around medical data. Right? We have right now a culture that says it's very, very private. Medical data is very, very private. You must never let anyone but your doctor see it. Right? Patients like me can't work, cannot work in that culture. But they know that. So not only do they have a privacy policy, they have what they call an openness philosophy, and I'm sorry it's a little cut off there. They specifically make the argument to every user who signs up, it will be good for you and good for the world if you share information that the world is currently telling you to keep private. If you share your medical details, everybody will get better faster because research will be able to proceed more rapidly, at lower cost, with higher accuracy. But to get those good effects, we have to not just ignore the culture of the current healthcare industry. We have to undo it. We have to reverse it. If all that Patients Like Me does is puts together panels of patients that happen to help a handful of pharmaceutical companies make money, they will have failed. Right? They have in mind nothing less than altering the culture of disease. They want to make having a disease not be something shameful, not be something you hide, but something you share, in order to bring to the medical establishment a lot of the same kinds of values you can see in other stories here, from the Association of Loose and Forward Pub-Going Women to Wikipedia. I don't know if they'll succeed or not. It is an enormous hurdle they have set for themselves. But it is one of the most aggressive and noble attempts I know of to take what the tools make natively possible, which is widespread sharing, and to match it with a set of cultural norms that will make our lives better, but which can only operate in the face of the existing culture. I find myself in the sad position of teaching my own youth as ancient history. And one of the hardest things to convey to 25-year-olds about the web is how crazily contingent it all was. Right? From their point of view, the web was always going to be a good idea. Wikipedia was always going to work. Linux was always going to run the world's servers, and so on. And I have to try to explain to them that we really didn't know what was going to work and what wasn't. And that the things that started out, when they started out, didn't seem important. They got important, but they didn't start important. So I have a slide I put up for them, and I will put it up for you. Oh. Sorry, thank you. Wrong slide. There we go. Slide I put up for them that I will put up for you.